Imagine a deserted amusement park with lights flickering dimly and rusted rides creaking in the wind. The camera zooms in on a motionless carousel where the figure of a sinister clown emerges from the shadows, its laughter echoing eerily. The scene cuts to a young woman in a cluttered office, flipping through files of unexplained disappearances in Brookline. A voiceover whispers, "The stories were just that, stories. But what happens when legends come to life?" The morning in Brookline started slowly, as always. At the corner cafe, Sarah Harlow flipped through a newspaper while sipping a weak, cold coffee. As a freelance journalist, she specialized in strange stories and forgotten places. A recent report about an abandoned amusement park on the outskirts of town had caught her attention. "There's a reason nobody goes there," the cafe owner had said the night before, without giving any details. Now, with the page of a yellowed article before her, Sarah wondered if the park was just a silly legend or something far more disturbing. Brookline was a small, stifling town where everyone knew everyone. As a newcomer, Sarah noticed the wary glances whenever she asked about the park. "The ghost clown," someone whispered before slamming a door in her face. The few reports she found described a case of mass disappearances in the 1980s. Entire families vanished near the park, and the events were never explained. But what intrigued her most was the clown figure described in the accounts, a painted face with an eternal smile, but the eyes empty, like holes in the darkness. During a walk downtown, Sarah noticed a faded mural on the wall of a closed shop. It was an old advertisement for the park, featuring a cartoonish clown holding colorful balloons. Time had washed out the colors, but the smile still seemed to mock her. She snapped a photo and decided she would visit the site, despite the locals' warnings. Meanwhile, a few blocks away, former police officer Ben Carter woke up from another nightmare. The face of a lost child haunted him. He had worked on Brookline's most infamous case, the disappearance of Tommy Grayson, which had happened at the park 25 years ago. Ben never forgot that day. The distant scream from a dusty carousel, the laughter echoing through the emptiness, and the oppressive feeling of being watched. After years of trying to bury these memories, he realized they were coming back with full force. That night, Sarah met Ben at a bar. He was sitting in the corner, a nearly empty whiskey bottle in front of him. After a brief introduction, she pressed him about the park and the disappearances. "If you know what's good for you, you'll forget this," he said. But something in Sarah's eyes made him reconsider. Maybe it was her determination or the way she seemed unafraid of the answers. Reluctantly, Ben agreed to take her to the park the next morning. The park was hidden behind a dense forest, making it even more sinister. When they arrived, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The entrance was marked by a rusted archway with barely legible letters. "Welcome to Joyland." Deflated balloons hung from crooked poles, and the abandoned rides were covered in overgrown vegetation. "It's like time stopped here," she murmured, taking pictures. As they explored the park, Sarah noticed something strange. Some rides still seemed to be working. A wooden horse on the carousel turned slowly, moved by a wind she couldn't feel. A cotton candy stand exuded a sickly sweet scent, as if someone had just used it. Ben tried to reassure her, but his own breathing was heavy, and he kept a firm grip on his gun. In a shadowy corner of the park, they found a small, dust-covered stage with a torn poster hanging beside it. A clown's face was printed on it, with the inscription, "Guaranteed Fun." Sarah felt as if something in the poster was watching her, but when she looked again, it was just faded ink. "Why does it still bother me so much?" she thought, but didn't dare say out loud. As they walked, a low, trembling laugh echoed in the distance. Ben stopped abruptly, his face turning pale. "Did you hear that?" Sarah nodded, trying to hide her nervousness. The laughter continued, now closer, but the sound seemed to come from all directions. "It's the wind," she said, more to convince herself than to reassure him. The moment of truth came when they reached the central carousel. The lights flickered, even though the park had been without electricity for years. Sarah took a picture, and when she looked at her camera screen, she saw something that hadn't been there before. A pale figure standing beside the carousel, with a wide, distorted grin. "Ben, did you see that?" Before he could respond, a loud laugh echoed so close that they both instinctively stepped back. "That's it, we're leaving," Ben said, grabbing Sarah's arm and pulling her toward the exit. But the path seemed longer now, as if the park was playing with them. The rides appeared closer, their shapes distorted in the darkness. Sarah felt a presence behind them, but when she turned around, there were only shadows. Finally, they crossed the rusted archway, breathless and shaken. Ben didn't say a word as he drove back to town, but Sarah couldn't take her eyes off the photos on her camera. One, in particular, made her heart stop, a clear image of the carousel with the clown standing beside it, waving directly at the lens. The rain started falling just after Sarah arrived at her hotel room. The sound of the drops against the window was almost comforting, but her mind couldn't rest. She fixed her eyes on the photo of the clown on the carousel, zooming in on the image multiple times. No matter how much she analyzed it, the figure was there, unmistakable. The pale face, the wide, empty smile. Worse yet, she was certain he was looking directly at her. Unable to sleep, Sarah called Ben. He answered with a hoarse, tired voice. "I need answers," she said bluntly. On the other end of the line, Ben hesitated. "There are no answers, only tragedies. You should walk away from this while you can." But Sarah couldn't. Something was pulling her into this story, as if the park itself was calling her. However, things had started changing in Brookline. Residents reported hearing mysterious laughter at night, always near their homes. Some children claimed to see a clown waving in the woods, but their parents dismissed it as nightmares. Sarah interviewed a group of teenagers who swore they had seen flickering lights in the park, even from miles away. The story was unfolding before her, but the sense of impending danger was growing. Obsessed, Sarah delved deeper into the park's history. In the local library archives, she found references to a fire in the 1980s that had partially destroyed the park. The incident had been covered up by authorities, but some records mentioned unidentified bodies, including children. The name Billy Smiles, supposedly the main clown, appeared repeatedly in old articles. He was described as charismatic, but his gaze always caused unease. Ben, on the other hand, was dealing with his own demons. Since visiting the park, he had been having vivid nightmares. In one, he was running through a maze of mirrors, chased by rising laughter that seemed to come from inside his own head. When he woke up, his heart pounded, and he avoided sleep again. He knew something was wrong, but he couldn't face the park alone. Sarah found an old journal among the library archives, belonging to a park janitor. The pages were worn, but they contained disturbing details. In one entry, the janitor wrote about hearing Billy talking to someone who wasn't there. He said they needed more children for the show. I thought it was just a marketing gimmick, but something in his tone chilled my blood. Sarah felt the weight of the words, as if they were directed at her. In the middle of the night, Sarah was awakened by a sound. It was a low, muffled laugh coming from the hotel hallway. Grabbing her camera, she slowly opened the door. The hallway was empty, but something caught her attention. A small, colorful ball rolled slowly until it stopped at her feet. Sarah froze, feeling an invisible presence watching her. Determined to understand what was happening, Sarah convinced Ben to return to the park with her. This time they brought flashlights and recording equipment. "If something is happening there, we'll document it," she said. Ben agreed, but his expression betrayed his fear. "This is a bad idea," he repeated, but he went along. The second visit to the park was even more terrifying. As they walked past the carousel, Sarah saw something move out of the corner of her eye. When she turned, nothing was there. Ben also seemed more agitated, his hand trembling as he held the flashlight. "We're being watched," he murmured, but Sarah pretended not to hear. Inside one of the abandoned cabins, they found children's drawings pinned to the walls. The images showed kids playing, but there was always a clown in the background, watching from afar. One drawing in particular made them step back. It depicted a child on a carousel, surrounded by shadows that seemed to dance around them. "These kids, they were trying to warn us," Sarah said, her voice breaking. Suddenly the park lights turned on. The colors were vibrant, but the glow felt wrong, like a dead light. A carousel tune began playing, slow and distorted. Sarah and Ben stood frozen, watching as the carousel started spinning on its own. In the center, something stood still, a tall figure with a wide smile and empty eyes. The clown. They ran, but the path seemed to twist around them. The rides came to life, emitting metallic sounds and eerie laughter. Sarah stumbled and fell, but Ben pulled her up. "We need to get out of here." When they finally reached the park entrance, everything was silent again, as if nothing had happened. But on the drive back, Ben suddenly slammed the brakes. "What is it?" Sarah asked. He pointed at the rearview mirror. There he was, sitting in the back seat, the clown smiling at them both. The car skidded on the road as Ben struggled to control the wheel with trembling hands. Sarah screamed, but managed to turn to the back seat. It was empty. "Wasn't it there?" she asked, her voice choked with panic. Ben didn't answer. His face was pale, his eyes locked on the road. "We're not going to survive this," he murmured to himself, more as a warning than a statement. When they finally reached town, Ben slammed the car to a stop in front of his house. "Get inside now," he ordered. Inside, the place was as chaotic as Ben himself. Piles of papers and empty bottles scattered around, but Sarah had no time to judge. "What did you see in the park, Sarah? I need every detail," he said, his voice unsteady. She hesitated before describing the clown, the lights, and the feeling that something was toying with them. "This isn't a joke. This is pure evil," Ben said, abruptly standing up. That night, they tried to make sense of everything. Sarah reviewed the photos on her camera, while Ben unearthed an old box of personal evidence filled with documents on Tommy Grayson's case and other missing persons. "These disappearances, they all have something in common," he said. He spread the files across the table, showing that the victims were children who had visited the park before it was shut down. Each had reported interactions with a friendly clown. As they analyzed the documents, Sarah began to hear a faint sound like carousel music. At first, she thought she was imagining it, but Ben heard it too. The music grew louder, filling the room until it suddenly stopped. In the silence that followed, a knocking sound echoed from the front door. Ben grabbed his gun and they both moved cautiously. When he opened the door, no one was there, just a box left on the ground. Inside the box was a small, dirty and aged clown doll. Its eyes were painted black, and its grin seemed even more sinister under the dim light. "It's a message," Ben said, throwing the doll away. But before he could do anything else, a note fell from inside it. In crooked red letters, it read, "You are invited to the grand show." Sarah started feeling something was wrong with her. Over the following days, she caught glimpses of movement in the corners of her eyes, as if something was constantly watching her. Ben wasn't immune either. He began hearing distant laughter in his house, even when he was alone. They were both on the verge of breaking. Determined to end the nightmare, Sarah convinced Ben to dig deeper into the investigation. They sought out former park employees, but most refused to talk. Only one elderly woman who had worked at the popcorn stand shared anything. "Billy Smiles was always strange, you know," she said. "He used to say that children's laughter was the most beautiful music in the world. But one day, he changed. He would spend hours talking to himself, staring at the empty carousel. And then the children started disappearing." Back at the hotel, Sarah started connecting the dots. There was something about the park that wasn't just tied to Billy Smiles, but to something much older. Local legends spoke of a passage point, a place where reality warped and the rules of the world no longer applied. The park had been built there deliberately, as if someone knew the power the location held. That night, Sarah dreamed of the park. In the dream, she was a child, running around the carousel while Billy Smiles watched her. He didn't move, but his grin seemed to stretch, consuming his entire face. When she woke up, she realized she was holding the clown doll that Ben had thrown away. Ben was getting worse. He started talking about leaving Brookline, but Sarah knew. "Running wouldn't solve anything. The park won't let us go," she said. "Not until we finish this." Ben seemed to agree, though reluctantly. "Then we go all the way. If we're going to die, at least we'll know what's killing us." They returned to the park one last time, fully prepared. Flashlights, cameras, audio recorders, and weapons. The night was eerily silent, as if nature itself was holding its breath. As they stepped through the rusted gate, the park lights flickered back on. The carousel music echoed through the darkness, both inviting and menacing. At the center of the park, a structure that hadn't been there before awaited them, a massive circus tent. The lights flashed in red and yellow hues, and laughter could be heard from inside. "It's the show," Sarah said, feeling a mix of dread and fascination. As they stepped inside the tent, the sight before them was something neither would ever forget. Rows of clown dolls sat like an audience, their vacant eyes fixed on the center of the stage. In the middle of the stage, Billy Smiles waited for them, his grotesque grin now wider than in any photograph. The tent was steeped in a dim, distorted light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The clown mannequins lined up in the stands were disturbingly lifelike. Their heads appeared to turn ever so slightly as Sarah and Ben crossed the stage, though neither of them dared to say it out loud. The air was heavy, as if something invisible was pressing down on them from above. Billy Smiles, or whatever that entity truly was, stood motionless at the center of the stage. His grin taunted them, mocking whatever courage they had left. "Welcome to the final show," he said, his voice echoing in a cacophony of human and inhuman tones. The laughter that followed made Sarah instinctively cover her ears, but Ben remained still, his gun aimed directly at the figure. "This is just a hallucination," Ben muttered, trying to convince both himself and Sarah. He pulled the trigger, and the gunshot echoed through the tent. But Billy didn't even flinch. The bullet seemed to dissolve into the air around him. "You don't get it, do you?" Billy said, tilting his head. "I'm not something you can hurt. I'm the joke. You can't escape." The tent lights flickered, and suddenly Sarah and Ben were no longer on the stage. They were on the carousel, now spinning slowly beneath an artificial starry sky. The music blared louder, each note stabbing at their ears. Around them, the laughter swelled, and shadows danced at the edges of their vision. Sarah tried to scream, but her voice was trapped in her throat. "You came here for answers," Billy said, now standing at the center of the carousel. "And I'm generous. I'll give you what you came for." With a wave of his hand, images began to take shape in the air around them. Sarah saw flashes of missing children being led into the park, their faces frozen in fear. But the most horrifying part was their fate. One by one, their forms faded, transforming into the clown mannequins that now filled the tent. Ben dropped to his knees, unable to bear the weight of the revelation. He saw Tommy Grayson's face among the mannequins. This can't be real," he murmured, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Oh, but it is," Billy laughed. "And you were part of it, even without knowing. All of you were. The fun only exists because you keep believing in it." Sarah grabbed Ben, trying to pull him away, but the carousel spun faster, as if determined to keep them there. "Why are you doing this?" she screamed. Billy tilted his head at her, as if puzzled by the question. "Because you made me," he said. "The fear, the stories, the laughter that turned to screams. I am the sum of all of it, and the more you remember, the stronger I become." The world around them began to collapse. The lights flickered in a frenzied rhythm, and the sound of the carousel warped into a continuous piercing wail. Sarah shut her eyes, trying to block it all out, but Billy's face still burned in her mind. "Don't look at him!" she shouted to Ben, but he seemed entranced. Whispering Tommy's name over and over, Sarah realized that the only way out was to break the cycle. She pulled out her camera and began deleting every photo of the park. With each image erased, Billy's form wavered, flickering like a candle about to go out. "What are you doing?" he roared, his voice losing its confidence. "You can't erase the truth." Ben snapped out of his trance at the sound of Billy's rage. Together, he and Sarah destroyed every record they had of the park, ripping up notebooks, shattering files, even smashing the camera to the ground. With each piece obliterated, the park around them crumbled further, as if being consumed by an unseen force. When the last shred of evidence was gone, Billy let out one final ear-splitting scream before vanishing entirely. Silence fell over the park. The carousel, now still, looked like nothing more than an abandoned ride. Sarah and Ben staggered toward the exit, exhausted but alive. The rusted archway seemed older, as if decades had passed in mere moments. Back in town, Sarah and Ben made a silent pact never to speak of the park again. They knew some wounds would never heal. Ben left Brookline the following week, and Sarah walked away from her career as a journalist, but at night they still heard distant laughter, and their shadows stretched longer than before. They had escaped, but they knew something was still following them, unseen, laughing from the edges of the dark. Months later, Brookline seemed to return to normal. The amusement park was officially declared off-limits, surrounded by rusted fences and warning signs. But the town still carried the invisible weight of its history. Children avoided playing. In the nearby streets and at night, the silence was suffocating, as if the entire town was holding its breath. Sarah moved to a small town deep in the countryside, trying to rebuild her life far from the past. She left journalism behind, but the memories of the park and of Billy Smiles were etched into her mind. Every time she looked at her camera, now gathering dust, she felt the same chill she had when she first saw the clown. Ben was never seen in Brookline again. Some said he had moved south. Others believed he had simply vanished. Sarah received one last message from him, hurriedly written and barely legible. "I still hear the laughter. Watch the dark corners. They never stop watching." After that, he disappeared without a trace. To the townspeople, the park had become a taboo, a wound no one dared to reopen. But legends began to spread among the younger generation, stories of a clown appearing in window reflections or lurking in the background of photographs. Some swore they could hear the faint sound of a carousel turning in the wind on the quietest nights. Truth and myth blurred together, continuing the cycle Sarah and Ben had tried so desperately to break. Sarah, no matter how hard she tried to move on, felt that the park was still inside her. Some nights, she woke up to muffled laughter, though her house was completely empty. She avoided mirrors and cameras, afraid of what might be staring back at her. The nightmare never left, no matter how far she ran. Years later, a group of urban explorers broke into the park, filming their adventure for social media. Their videos showed moss-covered rides and crumbling structures, but one eerie moment caught everyone's attention. A single frame where, in the background of the carousel, a pale figure could be seen waving. The video went viral, reigniting curiosity about the park. On a particularly quiet night, Sarah received an email from an unknown sender. There was no message, just an attachment. An old, blurry photo of Billy Smiles on the carousel, with a caption that read, "The show never ends." The moment she opened the file, a low, distorted laugh echoed from her speakers, even though they were turned off. After that, Sarah disappeared. Her house was found intact, but her belongings were scattered, as if she had left in a hurry. On the table, her camera sat open, displaying the last photo she had taken. An image of the park's entrance, its lights glowing, the rusted arch shining like new. Brookline became a hotspot for urban legend hunters. Some believed the park was cursed, while others dismissed it as mass hysteria. But those who dared to visit rarely came back the same, if they came back at all. They spoke of laughter in the wind, shifting shadows, and a smile they could never forget. One night, in an empty field on the outskirts of town, a carousel appeared. No one knew where it had come from. It wasn't registered anywhere, and no one had seen it being built. Yet, when people walked past it, they swore they could hear faint music playing and distant laughter, though the ride stood completely still. In the end, the park wasn't just a place. It was a cycle, an idea that fed on fear, curiosity, and stories. Sarah and Ben had only scratched the surface. Whatever Billy Smiles truly was, he was still there, waiting for the next generation of the curious. As the carousel turned slowly under the moonlight, a single red balloon floated into the sky, vanishing into the darkness. and on the wind, a quiet laugh mingled with the sounds of the night, a reminder that the show never really ends. The show may be over, but the story lives on. If you felt a chill down your spine, heard distant laughter, or simply want to uncover more mysteries like this one, subscribe to the channel now. Here, we explore the edges of fear, curiosity, and the unexplained. Every subscription is a step deeper into the abyss of the unknown. Turn on notifications so you never miss a spine-chilling episode that will make you question the reality around you. And don't stop here. Share this story with those who are brave enough to hear the laughter in the dark, or with those who think fear is just imagination. Subscribe now and join us for the next chapter of the never-ending nightmare. Remember, the show only goes on because of you.